Hi, welcome to your College in the Morning, brought to you by the facilities of Trent Radio. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Zach.
And we will be hosting this show for the semester.
This is our first show, and we'll be playing a clip that was recorded during the summer of Elias Trivett interviewing Shelagh Rogers and Alison Gzowski about Peter Gzowski, who our college is named after. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to this College in the Morning. My name is Elias Trivett, and this is going to be our launch show. So welcome to the program. I'm here with Shelagh Rogers and Alison Gzowski. Welcome. And
Hi.
let's hear about you guys.
Well, you should start.
Okay.
You're blood.
I'm Blood. Yeah, I am Peter's daughter. I'm the second of his 5 children. And I grew up, he was my father. I've been to Trent, I've been to Gzowski College, but I didn't work with him like my next door neighbor here, Shelagh did.
But you lived with him.
I lived with him,
Yeah.
yes, most of my life. And I lived with him while I was growing up, and then I moved in with him as an adult when I was going to university for a few years.
Oh, that would be an exciting change.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Wonderful.
Well, I never lived with Peter, but I got to see Peter first thing in the morning for many, many, many years. I read listener letters on Morningside. For most of the time that Morningside was on the air, people wrote letters. The internet email wasn't a big thing until about 94, 95, and Peter didn't entirely trust it.
No.
But then once he did, he was always writing emails. But
he couldn't figure it out. Remember his first computer looked like a box, and it wasn't Apple, and he really adapted to Apple because it's more user friendly. But he could not figure it out.
Yeah. And I met Peter. So I'll say the second time I met him. I don't remember the first, but he told me it wasn't when I interviewed him about the very first Peter Gzowski golf initiatives for literacy. I was hosting the morning show in Toronto, and he came in before he went off to do Morningside to tape an interview with me. And I was extremely, extremely nervous because I was interviewing the great interviewer. And he told me, he said, "You shouldn't be nervous. I'm the guy that can't remember to put his socks on in the morning." And he lifted up his pant leg and showed me that he didn't have any socks.
Whoa.
Wow.
He hardly ever wore them.
That's right. I came to learn that, right? But
he
really tried to make me feel comfortable.
And then one day, not in that moment, you didn't know, but one day you were going to be taking over kind of that programming, right?
I sure as heck didn't know that then.
Yeah.
I didn't. But I think for me, I think what worked, I was so nervous, I was kind of rude to Peter. And he preferred that to, the reverence.
Mm-hmm.
And he did tell me, though, if I laughed a lot while reading the letters, he might have to break a leg, and not his. So anyway, we had a what he called badinage, sort of a back and forth kind of teasing thing, and he was totally also my mentor. So
yeah, that's wonderful. So what are you guys up to right now?
You mean at this very moment, or in general in our lives?
The festival, and where are you at with your lives right now?
Oh, well, we're at the Writers at Woody Point Festival in Grossmoor, Newfoundland, which we have been part of for 19 years.
Allison was the founding artistic director,
and Shelagh was the founding host and still the host.
And Allison invited me to come and host it.
Yeah.
So I haven't left. And it was really started as a celebration of Newfoundland writers and Newfoundland music, and it's pretty well kept to that.
Yeah, with some additional international writers.
Yeah, and mainlanders.
Yeah.
So
amazing. That'd be so fun and it's a summer program every year.
It takes place roughly the middle to late August. This year it's the 17th to the 20th.
Yeah.
And it's become a thing. It's become very popular, and really, if it weren't for the community here, it wouldn't have taken off.
Yeah. I lived Partly how I got
Yeah.
involved was I had lived, one of my first big jobs was, or first grown-up job was, I was the network producer in St. John's, Newfoundland. And I had done interviews for jobs quite a few before I got this one. And I was moving to Newfoundland sight unseen. And my father drove me to the airport. And one of the few things he said, because he was not big on long-winded advice, but he said, you don't know how lucky you are. And he's right about that. Newfoundland is a spectacular place.
What does a network producer do?
The network producer, finds local stories and from where they're living. So when I was here, I would find stories that were happening in Newfoundland and call up and contribute to all the national radio programs with the ideas. And then if they like them, chase them and produce them or help produce them from this end.
Yeah. So seeing your dad in that world, did that kind of like inspire you to get into that as well?
No, I don't. I think I fell into it accidentally. Although at some point I realized I had an English degree and there was very little I could do that he hadn't done if I was doing something in that world. He was a writer, an editor, a TV person, a radio person.
Yeah. Walking around.
That would be different.
Yeah. Walking around this building, you can see like a lot of, they have a display case with like many books and different things he's in there. And I took some time to listen to some radio shows. He reminds me of like Bob Ross almost, with like his welcoming, calm voice. And like, I'm like, what a wonderful personality to base a building around and a community around. Yeah. So tell us about like, what was he like as a person and working with him, living with him?
Working with him, he was, I found him wonderful to work with. I will say this though, he had to get up very early in the morning to do his program, to do Morningside, 3 hours. I mean, imagine getting ready for 3 hours of live national radio. And he would come into work and just sort of, go over all the material. He didn't want any interruptions. No one was going to go in and say, hey, Peter, what did you do last night? That wasn't going to happen. And he was dedicated and committed during those 3 hours of radio, to the point where people would come in to the studio when music was playing and Peter might not look up. And then there was nobody else in the universe but you and Peter in the studio. He gave you everything he had. And everything he had. He had so much curiosity, genuine curiosity. He was so obsessed with this country. And when I started filling in for him, it was the Quebec referendum. So it was 95. And boy, that was an obsession. Every item we did was about Quebec. Both yes and no sides. This wasn't about saving the country. It was about representing the country every morning. And it was a huge workload. He woke up at 3:13, not that I ever saw him wake up, I want to stress, but he said he liked the symmetry of 313 on his clock radio. And if people could get an interview with Peter, it could really change things. People really listened to that program. It was a program of record. It was a must listen, and it changed things.
Incredible. And so the other side of him, so when he wasn't working on his radio show, what was he like as a person?
He was like a big kid at heart. That's partly his curiosity, but he was playful. He loved to play games. So, I don't know how many times after dinner we'd play dictionary, where you have to guess the words in the dictionary. There's all seven of us around the table doing that. Or he would play, he was self-taught on the piano. So sometimes he'd play a note or two notes and we had to guess which was higher. Or we'd play Trivial Pursuit and he could take on the other six and still win. But he was lots of fun. He had endless energy. He was tons of energy. You could wake him up. I don't know how many times I woke him up from a nap. Even when I was growing up, I'd phone it because he would come home from work after no sleep, and I'd call him, forget he was sleeping, and I'd say, "Sorry, what? No matter." And he was very open and playful and curious.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that translated to the radio in a way that was, he did all sorts of things that were never done on the radio before, like playing a game of cribbage on the radio, for example. And he thought about always bringing different parts of the country together. I remember there were sort of big music, well, we'd call them hootenannies.
Mhm.
So you'd have a folk musician, say from Newfoundland, and someone in Nova Scotia, Quebec, Saskatchewan, and then BC, and the North. The North was really important.
Yeah.
And you try and put them all together, singing songs and harmonizing. And it was absolutely phenomenal, and at the time, revolutionary.
Yeah.
And he was just so concerned that the country was always represented, that yes, it came from Toronto, but there was so much more to Canada than Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did. She was right. He was so passionate about the
Yeah.
country. He often used to say that he was going to write his memoir, and it was going to be, I think, based on his experience when he got out of university, and was supposed to be titled something like "When All My Friends Went to Zagreb, Paris, and London, I went to Moose Jaw." Where he did go, and that's where he met my mom.
Yeah. And he didn't like earnest stuff. He had this expression, and I still think about it these days: earnest is boring with a university degree.
How could students take that advice and put it in their papers?
I think to really do more than is expected, to imagine otherwise. That is something that I think Peter would really live by.
And be true to yourself.
Yes.
Don't try to be putting on a more authoritative voice because you think it's expected.
Yes. Yeah. And that was, the first time I had to fill in for him on Morningside, I was just absolutely terrified. And so I called him. He pulled his back muscle, and asked him what I should do. And this is like one of the big critical lessons of my life. He said, well, just listen. And I said, yeah, but then what? And he said, no, that's it. Just listen. And that he was right. And he would say, you're going to have these amazing questions prepared for you by your producers. And that's great. Read the background. The questions are only a roadmap. They don't have to be asked in the order. And if something else comes up in the conversation that's fantastic, follow that. Yeah. And just, really keep your ears open.
And he was always open to any kind of thing. So I can remember one summer reading with dumb beach books. And I thought and I was kind of embarrassed because he saw me with, I forget what, Jacqueline Suzanne or something. And he said, as long as you're reading.
Yeah.
And he would always, as long as you're engaging and trying to do something. And with us as kids, it didn't really, of course he hoped we would do well in school and he wanted us to, but if your mark wasn't what you had hoped for, he always said, as long as you did your best.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna, as working in student residence, I meet with a lot of students who are like maybe struggling with their academics. That's something I'm gonna use. I'm gonna be like, Peter Gzowski would, as long as you're trying, he'd be happy with you.
You know that he, when he went to university, I think his first English exam, or was it an essay? Essentially, he got a terrible mark and was told, you will never be able to write.
Oh yeah.
So
unreal.
It's like, is that the teacher giving up their own work right there? Like, oh, I'll never be able to teach you anything. Like, it's just, it's sad how often you hear that.
Yeah, it
students, is. But, so let's talk about his experience here at Trent. So he was the chancellor. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
He loved it.
Yeah.
He loved it. He liked meeting young people, and he liked meeting new people. And he was really engaged in, he'd like to go up and have, he used to do these round tables, I think. I remember a couple of writers I knew were on them when they were in student. That's what I remember most, is how much he talked about loving it.
Yeah. He loved Trent. I'm not just saying this because we're talking about Trent.
Yeah.
But, the beginnings of Trent. Trent was seen as something revolutionary and maybe even a bit rebellious of course Peter would have remembered Trent being built and how it stood for environmental values before that was even a really big thing, and a focus on Indigenous Canada. And before that was really a big thing too. And really the excitement of learning. I also knew, and I had the fortune of being a chancellor myself, but at a different university. But you could call, he said, I can just call someone on faculty. If I need to know something, I can just call them up and they're going to tell me what I need to know. And that made me think about how he thought about the listeners at Morningside as the greatest encyclopedia there was.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much knowledge, and just like I mean, it's my only university experience here, but yeah, I've experienced that too, and I like asking anything you need to know. There's someone here who will at least like know which book you need to read.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it was great. And as Alison said, like he really loved being with young people. It was, it really stimulated him. It really challenged him. And once people sort of got over the fact that this was the chancellor and this was Peter Gzowski, he had people to play with. He had people to bounce ideas off of, and he loved hearing new ideas all the time.
So if he was around now, what do you think he'd be saying about this college being named after him? And what do you think of the culture he would want this college to have?
I think he'd be privately thrilled and publicly slightly humbled by it. Yeah, I think he would. I'm sure he would love it. And I think the idea that there's First Nations emphasis is utterly important to him. So I think he'd be so happy about that.
Yeah, I don't know if like when he was here, this was a thing, but now it's mandatory as well to take Indigenous course in first year for everyone, or not at least one throughout your career here. I happened to, because I was in business as a joint major with psychology. I did a 4th year business or Indigenous perspectives of business course, which was just incredible. I learned so much about business, but like also got to like look at it from like that lens and learn about like the business that's happening in Canada right now from that lens. So that was
that's amazing.
I think that something that Peter took from his Indigenous connections, and if you don't mind, I also think Inuit and Métis as well, that so much of like even business is about values and less so about interests. And that was something I know he was really mulling over, like how could we bring those sorts of things into the public sphere?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about economic interests, right?
Yeah. And you know, there's good connection here, and we're always thinking about like how we can like partner, you know, like we have a shared building now, but getting people into those spaces, into each other's spaces, and like more engagement and stuff. And there was just the Indigenous Fringe Festival here, which was fun and exciting. A lot of wonderful Indigenous artists performing different types of art.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so so why did you switch the name from this Country in the Morning to Morningside?
They were different shows.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the difference between the two?
Well, they were separated by a number of years.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He did This Country in the Morning, which was a little more haphazard, I would say. Like there's always the producer of it, Alex Rang, used to talk about coming in with an armload of record albums under his arm and then shoving them across the table, and they would just pick and play. So it wasn't as programmed or curated or organized as Morningside was. So he did This Country in the Morning, and then I don't even remember why he left. Do you?
Television. Right?
Was that when he was live?
I think there were other years that he did other things.
Yeah.
But Alec and Peter left to create a TV program. I think with the same kind of aspirations as This Country in the Morning, and it didn't really translate to television. I've seen, you must have seen some of the episodes. I thought they were great. I'd watch that kind of TV. It was.
Oh yeah, there's the famous. I love watching the one with the interview he did with Iggy Pop.
And Alan McPhee was on that episode as well. A great CBC host of a program called Eclectic Circus. It was pretty wild. So they put very different people together, and the dialogue, the conversation was always great.
They had really great guests, but it was a late night show,
Yeah.
and I don't think the country was interested, and maybe still not.
Yeah.
And there he was in a suit sitting behind a desk. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy doesn't even wear socks. You know, and he'd smoke all the time, and he'd have his arm over his shoulder, and the ashes would drip down one side. Like, this was not a man who should be wearing a suit to work for any job. And it was just not his thing. It was, and he would look uncomfortable, and he was uncomfortable.
There's probably still a video of Peter's his farewell from 90 Minutes Live, where the desk is not there. He's sitting in a chair. He lights a cigarette, makes a big point of that, undoes his tie, and talks about, this is enough. I'm leaving, and this isn't really who I am. So
yeah, and that's when they went back to the other, to start a show again on the radio.
Well, not right away.
Yeah,
no,
right
he did
away.
some freelance work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it hurt.
And writing too.
It was publicly seen as the show was seen as a failure. So he took that hard, because he puts his heart and soul into his work.
Yeah.
And he's just that kind of person. He took it hard, and then he did some freelance writing.
Yeah.
And he did a little bit of freelance radio. He did a weekly radio show, and he filled in it as it happens. But I think at the time
mostly music as well.
Oh,
he did some classical programs too.
God.
I know, imagine.
And then he came back to Morningside in 1982.
80.
If it was 15
It was
years.
no, it was 82. That's
82,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, after Don Heron. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Hi everyone, we're back just to take a moment for anyone who may just be tuning in. I'm Zach.
And I'm Kelsey.
And you're listening to Your College in the Morning, brought to you by the facilities of Trent Radio.
This week, we're listening to a clip that was recorded earlier in the summer by Elias Trivett, who is interviewing Alison Gzowski and Shelagh Rogers about their experiences with Peter Gzowski.
If there was a chance for students to pick some content to check out, to maybe some of these episodes or episodes of the radio show, or like a book, what would you recommend them looking into? What are some of your favorites?
Book wise or radio episode wise?
Some of all of it, yeah.
Oh man, there's just so much.
For his books, I would say A Private Voice, his memoir.
Yeah.
Because that does have some thought about the country and how he did his work as a radio broadcaster.
Yeah. As far as what you might be able to retrieve from the archives, there's that may be difficult, but they retried Louis Riel. And that to me was an amazing piece of radio. The other thing, and it became a template for At Issue, I guess, on the National, and they were the political panels of Kieran's, Camp, and Lewis. And it was Eric Kieran's, Dalton Camp, and Stephen Lewis, a liberal, a conservative, and a national New Democrat. And the three of them were amazing. And an example, they were on every Friday, started the show, and they talked about the issues of the week, but they weren't partisan about it. They were thoughtful, three really thoughtful people. And they came from a partisan background, but they really listened to each other, and Peter asked incredible questions. So it was great. That's something that would probably be quite easy to find.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that listening is just a trend. And that's a skill that we teach in at Trent for our staff for supporting students, is helping them guide the conversation and seeing where they are and not having assumptions when you go into the conversation and stuff. And boy, could that episode you're talking about, or was it a regular? It
was a regular weekly. Yeah.
That would be very nice now too, if we had that with our leaders.
It really would be. And I'm sure now it would probably be a more diverse panel, but and that was something Peter recognized about Morningside, that it needed to change. It needed to be a more inclusive program, although it was pretty good for its time, I dare say. But there was always more to do, and he knew that, and he really pushed for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something we push for here too at Trent
Yeah.
and in
Yeah.
Gzowski College. We're always thinking about, there's constant meetings about like, okay, where are we at? How are we going to grow? How are we going to be more
Yeah.
inclusive?
And I would say the other thing about Peter is he would say, you think you're doing enough? Just when you think you're doing enough, you're not. Just
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we
yeah.
have the meetings, because
Yeah.
it's not something you can like meet once and then it's got to be constant. Yeah,
Yeah.
constant reflection. That's so interesting.
Mm.
So what do you think, like if he was to give advice to students or to teach, if he ran a lecture here in his own college, what do you think he'd run it on?
Wow.
Wow. Radio loves silence, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
But that's the sound of us thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would want to know what the students wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like kind of a classroom to like teach people to find their own voice and like that kind of thing.
Oh, if he was teaching, what would he teach? God.
Maybe because he had to be because of the program, but he was always interested in the state of Canada. I mean, that's putting it very, very generally. But the Constitution became Canadian just as Morningside went on the air. And Meech Lake was a really big thing.
They put Meech Lake
Morningside.
on trial.
Meech Lake went on trial. That's right. And free trade.
Oh no, free trade was on trial.
Yeah.
Was Meech Lake on trial?
I can't remember if Meech Lake was on trial,
but he got like really high-powered lawyers to make a case. Like it was actually in court.
I think so. Yeah,
it was like Eddie Green's.
I think so, and you certainly talked to Elijah Harper.
Yeah.
So it's. I just think it was such a passion for him. And, Alison knows so deeply, and this is true of you too, that he cared so much about the North.
He did.
And it was a real passion for him. And he was there the day Nunavut was born.
Yeah.
And
he was up there a lot in the
was.
Summers. In fact, I remember once him coming home and saying we were moving there. Not what you want to hear when you're on a beach in your bathing suit in the middle of summer and you don't have any idea what the North is like. But through him, I got to see the North and I now know why he loved it so much.
Same here. Yeah.
Okay, so final thoughts on bringing you back to that college culture kind of thing. A lot of people live here in this building, and I've been one of them, and it is like a home for a lot of people every year. And what do you think you want his home to be like for these students?
I'm going to give you the last word.
Oh my God.
Okay, so I'll just say open.
Yeah.
I would say have a great big table where people could talk and eat and have coffee. That would be important.
I wish you could see I'm in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That is available for students to book and eat. Right. And they rent this espresso to watch. There's a TV here, there's a kitchen in here, and a big table. Yeah. And I just wish you could see where I am right now.
That's really awesome. And, I think we never talked about community radio, but he believed in radio and he believed in community. So, I think you got it all going.
Yeah,
there.
I think you do. I can't add much to what Sheila's saying. I think he would just want a place that was where you were living, where it was open to people talking to each other about whatever they wanted to talk about and learning from each other through conversations.
It's incredible. All right. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for
Thanks,
inviting
Elias.
us.
Yeah.
No
Keep a fire for Peter Gzowski.
Thank you for tuning in to Your College in the Morning, brought to you by the facilities of Trent Radio. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Zach.
And we'll be back next Thursday at 9 a.m. with more super cool content, so be sure to tune in to 92.7 FM.
We're excited to be riding the waves with you this semester. If you have any questions, suggestions, or just things to say, feel free to reach out to Gzowski@trentu.ca and we'll be happy to connect. That's all for now, folks. See you next week.